Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Law Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be talking about the transit of Jupiter through Taurus. So let's get some dates out of the way first. Jupiter is going to enter Taurus on the 16th of May 2023. It will then square Pluto on the 18th of May. It will conjoin the North Node on the 2nd of June, sextile Saturn on the 19th of June. Then on the 4th of September, Jupiter will station retrograde at 15 degrees 34 minutes of the sign Taurus. It will then station direct at 5 degrees Taurus 34 minutes on the 31st of December, right at the very end of this year. And then into 2024, Jupiter will conjoin Uranus at 21 degrees 49 minutes of the sign Taurus on the 21st of April 2024. It will then sextile Neptune on the 23rd of May 2024, and then it will enter Gemini, so it will complete its journey through Taurus on the 26th of May 2024. I will put all of these dates below so you've got a handy list there, and I will be talking about the major aspects that Jupiter makes as we go through this recording. So basically, if you have any personal chart planets or points, particularly your Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, or one of the angles at somewhere between 0 to 15 degrees of Taurus, then this transit is going to speak loudest to you this year. And if you have planets or points in the second half of Taurus, then it's going to be more next year. Unless you are like me and you have planets and points at the beginning and at the middle or end of Taurus, and we get a whole full year's worth of Jupiter action. So who is Jupiter? We need to have a think about this first and foremost. So this is the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Zeus. Jupiter is the brother of Pluto and Neptune, and each one of them ruled one of the three realms. So Pluto rules the underworld, Neptune rules the oceans, and Jupiter rules the sky. In fact, his name actually means sky father. So he is the god of the sky and thunder. He's associated with thunder and lightning, connected to lightning bolts, thunderbolts, and also he is connected to eagles. He is the witness of oaths. So this is where the connection to the law comes in with astrology. Jupiter is one of the social planets, so the other social planet is Saturn, and this is because they're a little bit slower moving than the personal planets, and many people are going to be born with Jupiter and Saturn in the same zodiacal sign, depending on when you were born. So Jupiter can represent something of the culture that you grow up in and something of the aspirations and the beliefs of that culture. In astrology, we call him the Great Benefic. He is thought to be the bringer of luck and blessings, and he's associated as well with protection. Some say that the planet Jupiter protects the Earth from incoming asteroids. Just because it's so big, the asteroid hits Jupiter first. We also say in astrology that Jupiter, because of its size, it's connected with the idea of growth and expansion. So it provides us with opportunities to grow and expand. We also see Jupiter as connecting to joy and happiness. One of the names for Jupiter the Romans had was Jove, and this is where we get the word jovial from, happy. And in a way, sometimes we can think of him as a little bit like kind of a Father Christmas character, sort of fat and jolly. We have the idea of faith with Jupiter, optimism, abundance, wealth. Again, the sheer size of Jupiter gives this idea of abundance and wealth. And Jupiter in astrology is the urge to expand and explore. Remember that it rules fiery Sagittarius that has its arrow aimed up to the sky. Jupiter speaks of the urge not only to know, but to understand. So this is the difference between the kind of knowing and learning and education of Mercury. Mercury just wants kind of the facts and the stories, but Jupiter wants more. Jupiter wants to actually understand this and put it all together to get the big picture. Now, like every planet, Jupiter also has a shadow side, so his energy can be expressed in more negative ways. One of the big issues with Jupiter, big being the particular word here, is that we can big him up so much, that we expect so much when a Jupiter transit comes around, that we can end up feeling a bit disappointed. It's like it feels like sometimes Jupiter promises more than it gives. There is also the concept of inflation. So that might be literal with money, and I'll be talking more about that in a moment with Jupiter in Taurus. So we have inflation, and then the magnification of issues, exaggeration of issues, making mountains out of molehills. This is very Jupiter. We can also get very enthusiastic to the point of being overly enthusiastic or overly optimistic and kind of miss the details or misjudge, or we can be overly judgmental and pompous. The pomposity of Jupiter is one of the most difficult expressions, I think, as far as sort of shadow expressions. This is somebody who comes across as like a know-it-all, and that can be really annoying to kind of encounter. So we have the positive expressions and the negative expressions of Jupiter. Let's think about Taurus, where Jupiter is going to transit. So this is a fixed Earth sign. It's the first of the Earth signs. And so if we think about it as a progression, we could say Aries is the divine spark, and Taurus is the sign of incarnation. It inhabits this physical world. Taurus is about the physical world, material world, which is also the body. First and foremost, it's the physical body. Also, what started in Aries, what begins in Aries, Aries is a sign of beginnings, is ground into reality in Taurus. So we're very much about bringing it down to earth, bring that idea down to earth in Taurus. So we've got the idea then of the body, but we've also got the idea of the planet, Mother Earth. This too is Taurus. And by association, this sign is connected with agriculture. So anything to do with farming and agriculture, horticulture, gardening, anything connected with crops and growing foods and using our resources of all kinds. This is all connected to the sign Taurus. It is also commonly associated with money as well, and the sort of financial picture. Originally, we might have traded a goose for some cabbages, but now we trade in money. So we are very much looking at issues to do with banking and investment. So basically we're looking at everything to do with the movement and the accumulation and the spending of money. By association again, because we consider money to be valuable, this is also a sign associated with values. Our personal values, what we believe to be important and fundamental to life. This is a sign associated with security, but ultimately it's about survival. If you think about the opposite sign, Scorpio, that's a sign that's associated with death. So Taurus is life. It feels like life or death. This is why we are so fixated And fixated, a fixed sign, fixated on being secure. This is mine. I feel like I know where I am because I've got all my possessions around me. I've got all my things around me. I've got all my money in my bank. I know I can survive. It's all good. This is Taurus. I'm a sun sign Taurus. My sun is actually at 0 degrees of Taurus, so I can very much relate to all of the attributes of Taurus in all the different forms, both positive and negative. So we have attributes of Taurus which are patience. How long does it take to grow a tree or grow a garden? This is a sign that is super, super patient. It's also a very practical sign. Loyalty, stability. Taurus is reliable, steadfast, dependable, calm, peaceful, uncomplicated. We don't want the complications of opposite sign Scorpio that goes really deep and, wants to kind of look into every little nook and cranny and understand all these unknowns and the taboos. Taurus is not really interested in that. Taurus just wants to enjoy the moment and just be with the present and be with the now and be with what is here. This is one of the gifts of Taurus, to be truly present with the moment and truly present with life. Taurus is also associated with the arts. Think of the fact that Venus is the ruler of Taurus, and think of nature's art, flowers and sunsets. So commonly this can be a very artistic sign. Taurus energy helps us to persevere. It gives us a persistence to get to where we want to be, to keep going, to get the job done. This is a predictable energy. Technically speaking, of course, Uranus is currently going through Taurus right now. So this is where we start to get a little bit of a challenge to that predictable nature. But still, Taurus essentially is predictable. But it's also stubborn, stuck in the mud, old-fashioned, lazy, and possessive. And this is one of the most difficult aspects. I was talking before about how the idea of having something makes you feel secure, but that can sometimes get out of hand, and we want to have this person or this thing more than anything else, because then we will feel safe, then we will feel secure, then it's just going to be mine. So possessiveness and also greed are part of Taurus expressions as far as the shadow side is concerned. So we now understand more about Jupiter. We now understand more about Taurus. So let's have a think about how Jupiter in Taurus might work. And one of the things I like to do is to go backwards before we go forward. So we look back to some of the events or things that occurred in the past when Jupiter was in Taurus, because it might give us some ideas of what to anticipate. Now, this transit happens every 12 years. So for you personally, you can look back 12 years ago. So we're looking at 2011, June 2011 to June 2012. That was Jupiter in Taurus. And then Jupiter in Taurus was June 1999 to June 2000. And it was then March 1988 to March 1989. These are the last few cycles. So you could look back to those years and see what was going on and think about what was growing for me at that time. What got bigger in my life? What became more important? Where was my happiness around that time? So things are never going to be exactly the same. So it's not going to be exactly the same events that occur again, but very often there is some kind of common link that we can see, or a common underlying message. So these are the last periods of time when Jupiter was in Taurus. So I just had a look at those times, and I've just pulled out some interesting correlations that I thought might be sort of pertinent to think about. A big one that stood out to me because of Jupiter's association with the law was the fact that during Jupiter in Taurus, unfortunately, it brought us Section 28. So this law was in the UK, and it actually prohibited any promotion of homosexuality. And this is a comment made by Margaret Thatcher at the time, of course, the very, very Tory Prime Minister that we had for many years. So she said, children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. I mean, just it makes my skin crawl to read that out. But I do think it's important because it tells us something of the shadow, certainly nature of Jupiter in Taurus. We've got the whole thing here about traditional moral values. Traditional moral values is very Jupiter in Taurus. And then we have a law being made about the body, physical, you know, who you can and can't love. Remember, it's ruled by Venus. So this happened, unfortunately, under Jupiter in Taurus. But Jupiter, thankfully, the protector, undid all of this. Eventually, it was repealed. Also, during a Jupiter in Taurus cycle. So that's kind of interesting that there was a beginning and an ending. Jupiter brought us both sides of that story. We have a lot of big art around Jupiter in Taurus. So the film Big with Tom Hanks came out with Jupiter in Taurus. We've got a Superwoman single that was released by Karen White. We've got The World Is Not Enough. That kind of feels very Jupiter in Taurus. That was a theme song to James Bond. Don't Worry, Be Happy. I think that's a fantastic example of Jupiter in Taurus. The movie The Sixth Sense came out during a Jupiter in Taurus period. Now, of course, I know and love that film, and I know that it's about ghosts and seeing through the veil. So, you know, maybe we're thinking more Jupiter in Pisces or just Pisces. But I liked the fact that it was called The Sixth Sense because, of course, the physical body has 5 senses, but now we have an extra sense. So maybe Jupiter in Taurus brings us the idea that actually there are more senses. We have more to sense, more to experience through the body than previously thought of. American Beauty, the film, won awards during Jupiter in Taurus. So American Beauty, the title really relates to Venus. We've got Gladiator. That kind of makes me think of, you know, somebody who is very muscly. Maybe it's a bit more Aries. I don't know. I'm going to leave it there. We have Andrea Bocelli singing for Pope John Paul. That was an incredible performance. So that was very, very powerful. Of course, Jupiter can be associated with the Pope, with anything to do with faith. And then we have the idea of singing, which comes from Taurus. The Tate Modern Gallery opened during Jupiter in Taurus. Adele, a large lady as she was back in the past, large, beautiful woman. She had an album called 21, and that turned out to be the biggest selling album of the 21st century at the time. It even overtook Amy Winehouse. So Adele, big numbers, big success, a lot of money. Taurus, Jupiter in Taurus. As an earth sign, as I mentioned before, Taurus can actually speak of the planet herself. And unfortunately, Jupiter in Taurus has sometimes brought very, very powerful earthquakes. The most striking of these was the Spitak earthquake in Armenia, which killed like 25,000 to 50,000 people. I mean, it was really, really horrific. And there was also another huge earthquake in Turkey during Jupiter in Taurus as well. I also noted on a sort of more positive note that Jupiter in Taurus seemed to correspond to a lot of things to do with big numbers and population kind of explosion. So, for example, there was a woman who gave birth to sextuplets in Paris. We also had the day of 6 billion during Jupiter in Taurus, so when the planet hit 6 billion people. And then we also followed up with the day of 7 billion 12 years later when Jupiter again was in Taurus. India also reached a 1 billion population during a Jupiter in Taurus transit. And just as something different, but still thinking about big numbers, there was the big number change. It was actually called that took place in the United Kingdom. And this is when all the telephone numbers changed because they needed more numbers, basically. The other number that's important here as well, a big number and notable, is that the composite stock market index peaked during a Jupiter in Taurus period. It peaked at 5132.52. I don't actually know what that means, but apparently it signaled the beginning and the end of the dot-com boom. So that really caught my eye because Jupiter in Taurus, as far as I'm thinking and how I see this transit, can be a bit of a boom and bust influence. Lastly, as far as Jupiter in Taurus history is concerned, I just spotted that there were some big finds, big things and big finds that were associated with this period. So we've got a meteorite that impacted Earth. So that really is the sky god coming down to meet the Earth. There were 3,000-year-old sculptures found in Egypt, a 4,000-year-old mummy also found in Egypt. And there was a fossil egg, the oldest dinosaur egg ever found in the Northern Hemisphere. It was 150 million years old. So there certainly seems to be ideas of large scale, big numbers, big success. This is the kind of thing that we find with Jupiter in Taurus. So the sky god comes down to Earth and magnifies everything to do with Taurus positively and negatively. We come to now, we've just come from Jupiter in Aries, which perhaps brought us a ton of inspiration and energy, all these ideas flying around. But now we must ground those ideas into reality. This is going to be a period of time of slow growth. Lots of things were happening very quickly whilst Jupiter was in Aries, but now it is all about to slow down because we have to do the work to see the tangible results. And that is going to take time, just as, like I said before, it takes a long time for an acorn to grow into an oak tree. So when Jupiter is in Taurus, we are kind of blessed for being persistent and for working hard. However, for all the focus on working hard and being persistent and all that kind of thing, there is also a prompt from Jupiter to take time out, take time to relax, an increased need to take care of the physical body, which includes time to relax and to actually enjoy the beautiful things that we have here. Smell the roses. That's the idea with Jupiter in Taurus. Take time to smell the roses. And there is an increasing need to be present. And this is what I was saying before, to be truly present, which means dropping into your body and connecting to the earth beneath your feet and connecting to your surroundings. Again, we're not here just to survive. We're also here to thrive. And being present and kind of connected to what is actually around you in the material world is part of thriving. So generally, wherever Jupiter in Taurus is taking place in your own chart, this is going to be about where you need to feel more grounded, where you need to feel more secure, where you need to value yourself more, where you have more to offer. And Jupiter in Taurus is basically saying, the more you love yourself, the more you get grounded here, the more in the body you are, then the greater your tangible wealth and your material and emotional security. You're going to feel better here in this part of life. There is an opportunity for growth here, and the growth in a sense of security and a sense of being truly present here. That is going to be the most important aspects of this transit. Now, out there in the mundane world, thinking of all the things I was talking about before that's happened historically, I think we can definitely say there's going to be a lot of conversation about world financial matters, wealth, the World Bank, the stock markets, money matters in all kinds of things. This is going to be really uppermost, I think, especially as we've got Uranus going through Taurus as well. And of course, this has spoken a lot about digital currency, Bitcoin and all those kinds of things, which has kind of been destabilizing this very traditional system. And now the banks are starting to open their own cryptocurrencies and all this kind of thing. And I've just noticed recently in the last week or so, there's a new law that's going to come in that is going to give the tax office in the UK the ability to be able to seize cryptocurrencies if people don't pay their taxes. So I think this is a real expression of wanting to crack down on the freedoms that Uranus in Taurus has given certain people as far as digital currency is concerned. I think it is a really good time for all of us to consider our relationship to money, how money is going in our own lives. Obviously, I know that cost of living crisis and energy prices, certainly in the UK, and I know in some other areas as well, money is a big deal, and it's not always in our complete control because of what the governments are doing. But still, it can be useful just to explore, is there any possibility for me to be able to get more secure here? Or how can I have more abundance in my life, which is not necessarily financially, that will bring me greater happiness? What can I do here? Can I get more connected to the ground, to the planet, to my environment? Given the law about section 28 coming in around Jupiter in Taurus in the past, I was also starting to think about maybe this again might speak of new laws connected with the body. And of course, with Uranus in Taurus, there is already a very big conversation about using technology and innovation to change the body. So these laws may be anything to do with trans to transhumanism. So we might be having more conversations about these kinds of issues. There may also be a lot of focus around women. I spoke about Adele earlier and the song Superwoman. So Venus is the ruler of Taurus. Her symbol is used for women. So we may have more women being more present on the world stage. Right on the cusp of Jupiter going into Taurus, we've got Elon Musk announcing that there is going to be a new Twitter CEO, and she is starting in 6 weeks' time. So that will be when Jupiter has gone into Taurus. And maybe generally there might be more laws coming in for women. Perhaps there might be more laws to ensure that women are paid equally. And I can't even believe I'm saying this in 2023, that women are still not paid the same as men in the same job, but it still happens. So hopefully Jupiter will help us with some of that. Generally speaking, I think there's going to be a lot more conversation about planet Earth, agriculture, farming, foods, and maybe there will be an increase in people interested in growing their own foods. There certainly seems to have been a push towards this over here in the UK. A lot more people are starting to grow their own foods. And Uranus in Taurus, that's already been kind of working on finding different ways of using our natural resources and also increasing diversity in flora and fauna. So this would be a really good time, I think, to, if you want to sort of experiment with that, maybe to grow some flowers on your balcony or some lettuce on your windowsill, even something small like growing some cress, because there's something about watching plants grow and tending to those plants, however small it is. Like I say, even if it's only like one little thing on your windowsill, maybe you don't have a balcony, maybe you don't have any outside space, but you can still grow something by your window. And when you do that and you really connect with the fact that this is a living form, it helps us again to be truly present, and it reminds us that we are part of an ecosystem. We're not separate. We're not separate from this ground. We might have, in my case right now, I've got, 10 feet of concrete between me and the ground, possibly more, because I'm up in an apartment, but still I am connected to the earth and I'm connected to everything on the earth. So when we grow our own food, or when we grow a plant of some kind, it reminds us that we are part of this system. And it's an important reminder, because the problem has been that we have kind of used and abused our resources. And this is Sedna. In the ingress chart of Jupiter in Taurus, Sedna is on the very final degree of Taurus, the weeping sisters. Sedna speaks of bad treatment. Her story is that she was betrayed by her father and ended up drowning and becoming a sea goddess. So she can very much speak of the abuse of our planet. And Jupiter coming into Taurus is saying there is so much available here. Isn't it wonderful what we have available to us? Planet Earth, gosh, what a gift. And Sedna is saying, yes, but if you don't look after it, then I'm not going to give anymore. I mean, this is what Sedna did in the myths, that if you didn't treat her right, then she would not offer up the fish from the depths of the ocean. She would withhold them. She would stop the fishermen from being able to catch any food, because she wasn't being treated right. And so this is also a possibility as Jupiter goes through Taurus, that we start to see how the earth can kind of almost like bite back, because we have not been using these resources in a way that is not respectful. Some of the shadow sides of Jupiter in Taurus is, I've already mentioned, greed. And then there's this hunger for more and more and more. Taurus is associated with weight issues. And I am one of those people that have inhabited this with my son on the 0 degrees of Taurus. Being overweight, overeating, overindulging, overspending, buying our way into happiness, consumerism, a growth in consumerism. Yes, that might be a good thing in some ways, because we've had a lot of problems because of COVID and all the rest of it. But at the same time, if we consume, then we just become like locusts, devastating everything around us. Jupiter in Taurus can also act like this as well. So Sedna, on this very final degree of Taurus, as Jupiter comes into Taurus, is really trying to keep us in check. The other god who is trying to keep us in check as Jupiter goes into Taurus is Pluto. Because the moment that Jupiter enters Taurus, it squares Pluto. Now, this is the first opening square, the first waxing square from the conjunction that we had between Jupiter and Pluto back in 2020. Yes, that year, COVID year, when everything shut down and it seemed like all opportunities were wiped out, were destroyed. Jupiter conjunct Pluto. And of course, we had the Saturn conjunct Pluto around that time as well. So there was so much going on in 2020. Now we have a bit of a test, Jupiter square to Pluto. We know that billions and billions were spent during COVID period to try to keep individuals and businesses afloat whilst people couldn't work or couldn't get to the office, and whilst people were ill. But also there were billions that kind of went missing, and a lot of billionaires became even richer. There were a lot of questions around how there was an abuse of power around that time for people to grow their power and to grow their wealth. Now we have this testing point with Jupiter square to Pluto that says, actually, you can't have it all. Pluto in Aquarius, this is power to the people. But there are some people who are trying to have it all. Jupiter in Taurus. And so immediately that Jupiter goes into Taurus, we've got Sedna screaming, I'm not going to let you abuse me anymore. And Pluto is like, well, there are some things that you can have, but you can't have everything. And so we're all being encouraged to look at what do you actually need based on your values and what's important, what's truly important to you, that truly brings you joy or something that you truly believe in, and what is just kind of excess that you don't actually need. And Pluto will help you to kind of get rid of what you don't want. The other thing that I noted as well is that Jupiter, as it moves into Taurus, is conjunct the asteroid Humpty Dumpty. So if you remember the story, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So we have some kind of story here of someone going through a great fall. This is likely to be somebody on the world stage rather than, sort of someone from Joe Public. I think this is much more to do about people on the world stage, people that have been in the public eye, that are connected with some of these massive power stories. And certainly Humpty Dumpty would suggest that somebody somewhere is going to maybe take the fall for a situation that has occurred. The other thing, though, is that asteroid Lowry is here too. It caught my eye because I actually live in the area where Lowry used to paint. He was an artist, and his focus for his paintings was the industrial landscape. So all the places that I sort of go walking every morning, these are the kinds of places that Lowry would paint, with the old mills and, all these wonderful old red brick buildings that, are still here in Manchester. So Lowry, I associate not just with my city, but also just with the idea of industrialism. So I'm just wondering if there's a connection here between Jupiter, the idea of greed, with the fall, the downfall of some kind, and industrialism. We've come a long way in our world, in our ways of farming, in our ways of surviving through industrialism, but also industrialism has also caused the planet a lot of problems, as I was saying before, because of the way we've cleared a lot of areas and all the stuff. We know all the stuff that's caused climate change, etc., etc. And also the other point I want to make, and I did talk about this in my monthly forecast for May, we have a T-square pattern as Jupiter goes into Taurus and it squares Pluto. Mars is also headed towards an opposition with Pluto in a few days' time. It's already in orb, and it's already in orb of a square to Jupiter as well. So basically, we've got Mars opposite to Pluto, which is a very feisty, potent, sometimes violent combination, and both of them are being squared by Jupiter. In other words, Jupiter is kind of trying to mediate between these two characters who are fighting against themselves. And I feel like this is why Jupiter in Taurus is really saying to us, we really do need to believe in the planet, believe in the earth, have faith that the earth can provide for everybody. We don't need to keep fighting one another. This is all to do with our shadows and demonization of different peoples, different groups. But if we become more present, more grounded, calmer, more peaceful, more patient with one another, then that might help to resolve some of these wars, some of this anger, some of this frustration, or the feeling that things are just spinning out of control. I mentioned right at the beginning of this recording the aspects that Jupiter makes as it goes through Taurus, the major aspects. I've already mentioned, of course, Jupiter square to Pluto, but we also have the conjunction to the North Node. As soon as Jupiter gets into Taurus, it is conjoining the North Node, which is at 3 degrees of Taurus. And so we get an immediate clue that there is a big opportunity here for us to evolve. Jupiter will then sextile Saturn, again on the 19th of June. And this is a wonderful combination because it also is another illustration of the idea of sort of slowing down a little bit, because Saturn always acts as a bit of a restraint to Jupiter. But a sextile is a helpful aspect. It's an invitation. It says if you choose, you can use this combination in a really productive way. Saturn in Pisces is about manifesting a vision. Jupiter in Taurus is about greater security for everyone. If we believe it is possible, we can make it happen. And then as we go into next year, 21st of April next year, Jupiter conjunct Uranus is some kind of big, radical shift. Maybe it's some kind of huge surprise. Maybe it is some kind of massive destabilization as far as our resources are concerned, or maybe our banking systems are concerned. Something huge is happening here. But often this can be a very exciting influence. There's a wonderful book, When Jupiter Meets Uranus, by my lovely colleague Anne Whitaker. I will be talking more about Jupiter conjunct Uranus next year as we get nearer to it. But if you're really wanting to do some deep dive studies into this aspect, then I absolutely recommend her book. It's really, really in depth, and there's lots and lots of material there to explore. But Jupiter conjunct Uranus, that's going to be the signature aspect of this transit, and some really major innovation is possible around this time. And then right before Jupiter leaves Taurus, it will sextile Neptune when both of them are on the very final degrees of their signs, the anaretic degrees that are critical degrees. But this is a helpful aspect, once again, the sextile, an invitation to use these energies constructively. Neptune in Pisces is soft, compassionate, kind. This is the opportunity to show kindness to one another. There is an opportunity to feel more connected to one another through connecting to the land and really truly understanding what is important, what is truly valuable. There's so much that we place value on in this age of consumerism that is actually quite meaningless. A growth in knowing what is truly meaningful, Jupiter sextile to Neptune, may really serve us as we move forwards. This concludes my reading for Jupiter in Taurus for the collective. I will be doing a part 2, possibly part 3 as well, which is going to look at Jupiter in Taurus through the houses for the signs, so you'll get a better idea of how this transit will manifest for you and what the lessons are for you personally. If you enjoyed this recording and you would like to support my channel, please click a like, subscribe to the channel. I will also leave my Patreon below if you would like to support me further and access other works that I do over on my Patreon. All the details are going to be below. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.